In a world that's all about online courses and automated learning, we're going to explore a totally different idea today, an education that's built not on institutions, but on people. Let's talk about personal transmission. So I want you to start by just thinking about this question. We're so used to measuring education by a diploma on a wall, right? Or the letters after someone's name. But what if the real measure was different? What if it was about the direct, personal legacy passed from one mind and one heart to another? That's the big idea we're diving into. So, where does an idea like this even come from? Well, it all starts with a concept that sees knowledge as a living, breathing thing passed down through a human chain. In the Islamic tradition, this is known as the isnad. Now, this isn't just a long game of telephone. The isnad is a verified chain, making absolutely sure that the legacy being passed along isn't just raw information. It includes the character and the reasoning of the teacher. In this model, the person is the medium. And that right there is the fundamental difference. It's a huge shift from thinking about institutional credentials to thinking about intellectual apprenticeship. The mentorship, that relationship, that is the education. The important question isn't where you learned, but who you learned from. Now, this personal approach, it wasn't just about, getting a job. The goal was way more ambitious. It was about providing a whole education, something that went way beyond the books. And they did this with a kind of three-dimensional approach. First, there's Dalim. You get the knowledge, the theory, the facts. But then comes Ta'adib, which is all about shaping your character and building self-discipline. And finally, you have Tarbiyah, which is about nurturing a student's total growth to their fullest potential. See, it's the whole package: mind, conduct, and spirit. Okay, so if education is this personal, this holistic, you can imagine that puts an immense amount of weight on the role of the teacher. The source material really draws a sharp line in the sand here. Is a teacher just a wage earner who's there to implement policy from on high, or are they something more? A commissioned leader, someone actually entrusted with the spiritual and intellectual guidance of the next generation? This model, it firmly argues for the second. In this worldview, you just can't separate the knowledge from the person who holds it. A teacher's authority wasn't just about being smart, it was deeply rooted in their personal integrity. Who they were was just as important as what they knew. The two were inseparable. A perfect example of this in action is the great scholar Imam Abu Hanifa. People didn't just respect him for his brilliant mind, they respected him for his personal qualities, his honesty, his warmth, his incredible self-discipline. All of that was part of his curriculum. You learned just as much from his example as you did from his word. So this brings up a really interesting question. If the teacher is so revered, does that mean the students are just supposed to blindly follow? Well, the answer is a definitive no. The method was all about reasoning over just memorizing things. The learning environment was anything but a one-way street. Forget a boring lecture. Abu Hanifa, for instance, he famously taught using a council of his top scholars. They would debate these complex questions for days, sometimes even weeks, until they all reached a consensus. It was dynamic, it was consultative, it was a workshop, not a TED Talk. And this demand for real intellectual work is captured perfectly in his famous statement. He's not saying, hey, trust me, I'm the expert. No, he's insisting, don't you dare repeat what I said unless you have wrestled with my reasoning and you get where I'm coming from. There's actually a specific term for this deep underlying reasoning. It's the illa, or the cause. And knowing it was non-negotiable. Knowing the what was basic. The real education was in mastering the why. So you end up with this beautiful, incredible balance. On one hand, students showed deep reverence for their teachers. They would attune themselves to their teacher's way of thinking. But on the other hand, they were constantly pushed towards ijtihad, independent reasoning. The goal was never to create clones. It was to train minds that could think for themselves, even if that meant disagreeing with the master sometime. And finally, this whole process, it didn't happen in a vacuum. It was deeply social. It was built on the idea of learning through association with others. This concept is called murafaqa. It means you weren't just a student of your teacher, you are a learning partner with your peers. You all grew up together, debating, discussing, and teaching each other along the way. You are a learner and a teacher all at the same time. And the result of all this? A truly unified education. Learning wasn't separated into different boxes or subjects. It was one single process that was aimed at developing every single part of a person, their intellect, their morals, their social skills, all at once.
All right, so let's just recap the big takeaways from this model. First, knowledge is a personal legacy, passed down a human chain. Second, character isn't just a nice to have, it's the very foundation of a teacher's authority. Third, real learning is a dialogue, and it's all about understanding the why, not just the what. And finally, all of this happens inside a vibrant community of peers.
And this brings us to one last really crucial question for today. In our age of endless information, where you can literally look up anything you want in a split second, what's the value of a model like this? What is the unique worth of knowledge that's personally transmitted from one human heart and one human mind to another?